It had no form. It had no possessions. It was just a dream. It all started so simple.
How we decided to start the church. Kim and I were driving, and she actually asked me the question.
Why do you think we haven't started a church yet? I forget the question exactly. He would know.
What's holding you back from starting a church? And that was a pretty personal question. And
It was a moment of honesty for himself, and
when she asked me that, I think I had this honest moment where I answered it, and part of it was just being concerned of being judged or being in the spotlight or being in the public, eye, and wasn't sure I was ready for that again.
he was able to realize there wasn't anything holding him back, and now was the time.
But just when I answered that, I just felt a release in my heart that it was time to start the church.
So we went forward and started the church in our living room on a Saturday in October.
We called up a few people and invited them to come meet on a Saturday in our living room. We told them we were starting a church.
So I got a call not long after that, and there were some of us he had invited together at their place.
And I remember we were driving home one day from, I think it was one of my wrestling practices, and my mom was like, "Hey, the Alstons are starting a church, and they're meeting at their place." And I remember being like, "Oh, that's kind of cool."
We called you and told you we were starting a church.
All of us had been a part of church planting in some way or another previously, and we really wanted to kind of do it differently this time around than it's normally done.
I didn't have any memories of Dad being a pastor at the church in Oklahoma, and so I thought, okay, this is going to be really exciting because I'm going to get to be able to be a part of something that my whole family's been a part of, other than me. And so it was pretty exciting. And
She was like, "Oh, it's called The Refuge." And I distinctly remember focusing on that word refuge and like, what does that mean?
We wanted God to be the one to build the house.
During that time in school, we were studying refugees and kind of how they felt like they were going from one place to another and they didn't really have a home. And I remember thinking like, oh, the refuge, this is going to be a home. I like that idea.
I think we all felt like we were very ready for this step, and I think God was working in every single one of our lives to help us with that.
And so we kind of got a small group together at the very beginning, and
I think we had 13 people there.
And then we just had that first meeting in our living room there.
It felt a lot like when we used to do worship sets with just the family, just people in the living room singing our hearts out, and it's super special to be able to feel that.
And then the following Sunday, we had our next meeting in the yard.
Yeah, so that was interesting. I was obviously not sure how all this was going to work. We didn't have a building location or anything like that.
I do remember we started to get more people coming and started to get more new faces there, which is really exciting and really special at that time.
The people there all pretty much knew each other, and I didn't know anybody. And I felt just so welcomed, and so it just was such a comfortable feeling. That's what I can say about it. It was just totally like I had known everybody.
And it was just so relaxed, so simple. It was kind of the beginning of something.
It was, I think, it was early fall, so we still had some decent weather, and we set up a couple of pop-ups out in our field in Blodgett.
I remember there was the big pulpit, there was the canopies, we brought our own chairs, we sat in the back.
And there's just something about being just in God's nature.
I think we had a little campfire going that day, and we just got together, and I shared the word, kind of shared my heart for the church. And I remember up on the Summit Highway behind our place, some people, I think their car broke down or something like that, so they could hear us, and they were kind of heckling us, and that was kind of interesting. But
when persecution comes on you and when people start to do things like that, it means you're doing something right. It means that we're starting to, I think that was the moment that I knew that, okay, like this is gonna happen, because I could just see Satan being like super frustrated, trying to throw everything at us and trying to figure out a way to stop us. And I think that was pretty exciting that we were doing something right.
You know, we really had no idea. You know, we just were trusting God, and it was just kind of this step of faith we had on our heart to do, and it's been amazing.
Starting with this bare bones church in the trees and in something that God created. Because I really think the refuge is God created. So it just made sense to be out in His nature.
It was just so pleasant. It was unexpected.
We wanted a place to call our own, even if it meant gathering somewhere we did not expect.
We were like, well, where are we going to meet? And it was, seasons were changing. I remember it was fall.
Yeah, so we didn't know where we were going from the yard there, the field in Blodgett, and then Brett and Chris McKeer and Gus offered to let us use their barn out in Blodgett.
We met there, I think, like twice, and then my dad offered to use our barn, which was really fun.
The next thing I know, he's offering our barn for the church service, which was entirely him. It blew me away.
And we were like, we love barns. Let's go. Let's go. What's stopping us? Who says we can't have church in a barn?
I think what was special to me when I was told, because I had been Tyler's friend for a long time. I went to school with him, and so I had been to that barn numerous times. I'd been to that house, and so I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's a familiar place. That would be really cool to have church there.
I was thinking, like, how in the world are we going to turn this room into a church? Because, you know, I used it to throw. I pitched in high school. We had like a mound there.
So we went up there and up in the loft of the barn and did a little cleanup. I remember there was a couple of big holes in the floor.
There was like these giant holes where people would drop hay.
And so we went and got some plywood and covered up those holes so nobody would fall through. And
I remember people coming and working on it. I remember the sound of the hammers in the distance as I was getting off the bus from school. And
we had to go and we had to clean up all the owl poop and sweep everything and make sure that the stairs were safe for people to get up, because it was like it's a 2-story barn. And so we're talking, this was like as organic as it gets, which is what we wanted.
And I think we got a few propane heaters to set up, because now it's, I think, mid-October. It's starting to get cooler.
I can never forget the anticipation of like, all right, I remember it was Saturday night. I was like, all right, tomorrow morning, people are going to be coming here for church. It was just so weird, because for the longest time, it was like I'd come home from church and then almost forget about church.
Seeing like the fog over the trees, how special it felt to have like an actual space that we were able to meet, and hearing the voices upstairs in the loft as I walk up.
The atmosphere was really cool, especially when the sun was coming up and it would shine through the slats in the boards.
And so when people started arriving and they started parking in our yard on Sunday, and the lights were shining through the wood.
The way the light came through that back wall.
You could see the sun coming through the wall and up through the barn. It just, I just loved it.
And the tables were set up and people were walking up the stairs and the chairs were set out, and then the music started playing. I remember just feeling like, wow, I'd never experienced something like that before. In my spirit, in my heart, it felt warm and cozy, and just like it felt like we were under some like blanket, you know, some spiritual blanket. Like, okay, we're doing something right.
For me, that was the first time that it really truly felt like an actual church service.
It was just so simple. You didn't have all the stuff getting in the way. It was just a bunch of people in a very simple place praising the Lord, and you could just feel the Holy Spirit.
Everybody just seemed to really love it, and got to have our first fellowship meals there. And
The barn is by far my favorite place we've ever worshiped. I've been in beautiful churches with beautiful woodwork and stained glass windows, but the barn was just so simple and so pure that I loved it.
What a step of faith. I mean, to just have church in a barn out in Blodgett. But it was a super fun experience. Maybe my favorite place we've ever done church was that barn. It was a super neat experience.
Little did we know this place would become one of our dearest memories. But the season was changing. It was getting colder, and it was time for us to move on.
And then it got cold.
It was cold because it was becoming winter.
So very cold.
It was way too cold to continue meeting outside or in the barn. And so we came across this little grange in Philomen.
The Grange was a big step. All of a sudden, now we're kind of starting to feel like a real church more so, because just, we've actually got chairs that we're setting up and a stage that we're up on. And
for me, it was a little scary because it meant having to put money out, and I was concerned that we wouldn't be able to make it work. But God met us right away and gave us favor with the people who ran the Grange, and we were able to get a really good price, and just seemed to, everything fell into place.
It's an old funky building, but it feels like you're at home all the time when you're in the Grange, because it's kind of drafty, but it's also, the lighting is really fun, and it's just, like I said, it's old and funky.
we would show up at, depending on how cold the morning was, 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, and start getting the fires lit. There was actually 3 fireplaces in that building that we'd have to light, one in the basement, one in the little children's room, or what we used as the children's room, and then one in the main thing there. And
It's not fun most of the time because it's freezing cold in the morning, or it's super early, you gotta stay super late.
I just remember it being super cold. And then here comes the big white truck with the trailer coming on in, and they'd back it up, and then we'd open up the doors, and then we'd run to the fireplaces, the furnaces, and get those going so that you'd get the place heated up.
we had to haul everything from Blodgett. First of all, we had to store everything at Blodgett, so it was all stored in our basement. And then even before we got the trailer, we would load everything up in the back of the Durango or in the back of my truck, and we'd haul it in to the Grange every morning and unload everything and set it up. And then when we got big and fancy, we were able to buy that trailer. And that was like a major upgrade for us to have a trailer, because we didn't have to unpack everything, because before we had the trailer, it was the challenge of every morning, Kim and I had to get up and go down in the basement of our house, get everything out of the basement, load it into the Durango, load it into the truck, drive 2 vehicles in, get everything set up. And then after church, we had to unload everything, put it back in the Durango, back in the truck, drive back to Blodgett. Then we had to unload it all out of the vehicles and put it back in the basement, and then turn around and do that, every Sunday. So I remember when we finally raised enough money and felt like we were in a position to make the decision to buy that trailer, and that what a big upgrade that was, that now we've got this trailer that we can store everything, and we don't have to take it out of the trailer and put it back in our basement. We can just leave it in the trailer. So
we began to feel a longing to be established, but for the time being, all we could do was stay steady and stay faithful.
one of the really cool things for me there was Jeff Mentor made us a pulpit that we still have and we still use sometimes. And so we got to set that pulpit up, and that was super special for a whole bunch of different reasons. I think just Jeff being a good friend of mine, and there was something about him making a pulpit for me that acknowledged the fact that, okay, I'm a pastor, I'm his pastor, and we'd been friends for forever, and we'd hunted together and done baseball together with the kids and those kinds of things. But that was a pretty special moment. I remember setting that pulpit up on stage, and just how that felt. So it's pretty neat.
Yeah, the Grange was amazing. I remember just walking in on cold, wet winter mornings, and the fireplace would be crackling, and the place would be getting warmed up, and everybody would be gathering around and drinking coffee, and
The twinkle lights and the log exterior for a while and part of it. I mean, just the, open kind of frame feel was just warm and inviting.
So it made sense, and it felt like a place where people would actually talk to you, and they did. And I had been in bigger churches before where I felt like I could go the whole service and not talk to a single person. And I wanted a place that felt like, we would actually know these people.
The atmosphere was, again, really cool. The lights and the wood floor and the stage. And we had room for children's to meet. And we, from day one, or from soon after, we had fellowship meals after every service. And that was a really neat time.
We all do life together. And we do, from all the events of the cider smash and all the different Christmas events that we do, going around to people's houses and socializing, and the small group things that we have done, and the eating together, after church, who does that? That's so fun. Everybody just hanging out and eating together.
We used to have questions that we would pose to everybody at the tables so that they wouldn't just be sitting there eating their food. They could ask each other questions, and what was their favorite memory growing up, or something fun like that, and they could talk to each other and really get to know each other. And it worked. Everybody really was able to ask deep questions, fun questions, and even we would have a time for the youth where we would ask trivia questions, see if they were listening. And that was really cool too, because if they answered all the questions correctly, they were put in a drawing for a $5 Human Being gift card or Dairy Queen or something. And so that really encouraged them to pay attention during the service. And they did great.
At the time, do you remember we only had one baby? And she was 2 months old or something. We didn't have any kids.
When we first started coming to the refuge, we brought in 4 kids to the refuge that I think maybe had 1 or 2, kids at all.
we kind of got in on that from the ground up, just kind of figuring out who was going to serve, how we were going to do this, where we were going to put it, how it was all going to come together. And every Sunday, it just was it was new and different in that aspect. And we had great people like Chris and Brett who stepped up to help, and Jill kind of took that from the beginning and just did that. And they were my kids, so I was like, I will help you with my kids.
We didn't have a lot of kids, but my kids were coming. Kids were starting to come. My family was starting to come. Some different things were happening. And when Jerry was talking about us looking for a children's pastor or a children's ministry director, I also fought that quite a bit.
We didn't have a children's pastor or a youth program or a children's program or any of that stuff. We did have an amazing amount of youth come right off the bat, which was really surprised me. It wasn't something that I planned or saw coming, but we just had this really great group of teenagers come right from the very beginning. And I think that was our core group. That was really probably the core leadership was with volunteers and people that were serving was these youth kids, these teenagers.
I wasn't best friends with everyone. I came in and everyone just had, it was such good chemistry. Everyone wanted to be there. Everyone wanted to be friends. And it was just, I don't know how to describe it, just a lot of positive energy, I guess.
So it was probably just about a year into starting the refuge. We were maybe just a year old, and we suddenly had all these teenagers. I don't remember the exact amount, but probably on the upside of 10. And we're we've got to do something with all these kids. We loved them. They're awesome kids. And so I think they met with Jerry for a little while, doing maybe a monthly or a every other week type thing. And then Aaron and I started going to some of those gatherings, and we really, really just fell in love with being with these students. Aaron was working full-time tree work and was antsy. He was antsy. And I knew that he was. And so I really felt like God was just telling me, just wait. He'll figure it out. Just wait. And so I didn't press him, but I knew that a change was coming. And I remember him calling me. And I had just gone to work. I was in the parking lot of my work. And Aaron called me and said, I think I need to step into full-time ministry. And I was like, I know. We were just a tiny little church with all these teenagers and had very little expenses when we started out. I mean, we still have very few expenses as a church, but back then we really had no expenses. I mean, it was like we ate lunch together after church, and we paid rent for a building. Like, it was awesome. Like, that's that's the way to start a church. I remember in that meeting just looking at the trustees and the leadership team that we had at the time and just really telling them, like, this is our heart. And if we could do this for free, we would do it for free. But the time that it's going to take to put into this to make it something great, we need a little bit of income to do it. And there was no questions. It was so natural. It just felt so right, just like everything else had up to this point in the refuge. And so we did. We started it, and we called it Uprise.
We had a Q&A in the Alston's house in the living room, and it was probably about 10 people there.
The first time I had ever came to Uprise, I was super nervous. I was super shy. I mean, I was still pretty much in 8th grade because it wasn't totally summer yet, and I didn't really consider myself as a high schooler until summer came around. And everybody were so much bigger than me. They were older than me, and they were so much more involved with everybody, and I didn't really know anybody. And I was just sitting on a tree, or I was sitting at a tree with my phone, and I was playing a game, and then Derek walks up, and he talked so much into me, and he got me from that tree out into the crowd, and from that day forward, I've been looking up to Uprise ever since. I love Uprise so much.
We were able to be so comfortable with each other and say things that are hard to say and ask questions that are hard to ask, and people, me being there and people being comfortable asking questions like that in my presence made me feel special, made me feel like, okay, I've helped make these people comfortable, and that made me feel comfortable with them. And so we're able to have a relationship that I couldn't have with any other people in my life.
There is something that I love about serving with the high school youth group. I love, there's this energy that they bring, and there's this energy that God takes, it's like he takes it out of me, and I'm able to just the way that I relate to all the kids, I just love them so much.
Eventually, we got together with another youth group that was meeting in Philomath, and we combined it, and Uprise became this group for anyone. It doesn't matter what church you go to. It doesn't matter if you even go to church. Come to Uprise because there's a place for you. And that was always our heart from the beginning when we created Uprise, was that it would be this place for anybody to come, be themselves, be accepted as they are. And I'm really, really happy to say that 5 years later, it's the exact same way. It's a youth ministry that is really thriving and has been incredibly impactful on many kids' lives. The way that God orchestrated all those moving parts is something only God could do. And he gets full credit for the way that Uprise has grown and flourished. And I could probably share for an eternity about what Uprise has meant to me personally. But I will just say the Uprise leadership team has been an incredible blessing.
I love the Grange. Yeah, it was really, again, the whole thing of, I think of us as like down home family, very, very comfortable place to be. The setting and everything just really spoke to me. Again, it was sort of farm-like, and I really like that. But we got too big, which was fine too.
God really expanded us quickly and has every time, right? Every time that we're faithful, every time we grow out of that space, it pushes us into something new, and we did, and we grew in children's really fast. And it started to become, as much as we loved what we were able to do there, it started to become difficult to maintain the integrity of what we were trying to do with the kids, because they really did need developmentally specific lessons that were delivered to them. We really did need spaces for each of our volunteers to be. And so we had to really start looking at, in addition to parking, in addition to all of those things, as much as we love that space, what we could do, other options that we had to be able to provide children's in the Roots ministry, at the time it was Refuge Kids, with the excellence that we always are striving for.
The Grange had felt like home. We'd been there for quite some time, and it felt like our space. It was a really warm and inviting space. It was cozy. But we were filling it up. We didn't have room to grow there. Our children's department was starting to grow. Jill had stepped in as our children's pastor, and so with that, it's getting more dynamic. We just didn't have room to really serve the kiddos well.
It was another one of those scary steps where, God, is this where you want us to go? It's a bigger financial jump. And, but it was really neat, because leading up to that, there were several Sundays that we couldn't meet in the Grange for whatever reason, and the school was available. And it was neat because it felt like God was preparing us to make that move. And again, another jump that was very, very good. And when the time came, it wasn't scary anymore, and it felt right. It felt good.
The Lord really stretched us in that place, like not just with being faithful and moving from the Grange, because we were all very comfortable. That was kind of the refuge feel, I think, was that space. It really felt like us.
It definitely wasn't as cozy as the Grange, but then also it felt like we fit better, because at that point we started to grow so much.
The school was cold. It had that cold feeling. It didn't have a warm environment. It wasn't very welcoming. But, we did the best we could there, I think.
Julie's main challenge is always going to be that she's cold. And if I'm too cold, I can't think. And there were some times that I would be in worship freezing. So if that was a challenge, then that was a challenge.
At first, I was excited to leave. I was ready to move buildings. It was just an exciting feeling. When we first got there, I was a little iffy because I didn't have that same feel. But then over time, we made it what it is. The church wasn't the building, it was the people. And so just moving on from that, we made every building we went. It didn't matter, it was just the home, the church. It just came with the bodies.
The refuge itself and the congregation, I think, merged well with the change. I don't think there was any, at least what I saw, a lot of, grumpiness or, animosity, or anything. It's just we worked with it, we flowed with it, we just went with it.
It was a lot of work because we'd have to break it down every week and set up every week, and so not having your own space was a lot more work.
You know, sometimes it was a real challenge for us, and we really had to pray and just really believe God. There were times, certainly lots of opportunities to feel discouraged. We'd put a lot of work into setting up, and maybe we'd have a really small crowd, not very many people would come, or for whatever reason we'd feel like the service didn't go very well, but we put so much work into setting everything up.
It's all worth it, watching the growth and the new kids come in and new families coming in and people that I knew from the area, having them join us.
I liked just the more space because it really let us all, you know, when we would set up at the end of the day or end of service for our meals and stuff, just the space that we had was just way more freeing than it was in the Grange. So that was my initial like, oh, I really like this spot.
We got a larger room to worship. We had classrooms for the kids, and we needed it to grow.
Just having to think about things like seat cushions for people, having to think about, keeping the kids kind of where they're supposed to be, not running around the halls if they went to the school there, and trying to really make that space our own at the time. That was a big challenge at first, trying to I don't know how to explain it, but try to make it our own space, but also respecting that it is the school. There were so many boundaries there, and knowing that we weren't gonna be able to, we didn't really want to stay there long, but we didn't really know what was coming.
To unleash the full power of the federal government in this effort today, I am officially declaring a national emergency.
So it was almost as soon as we kind of got in our rhythm, there was a global pandemic and everything came to a screeching halt.
I remember the day. It was a Friday. I think it was March 13th. And we were in school. And I remember one of my teachers just being like, everything's about to change.
It was painful for me to be cut off. That's it. I can't sing on worship. I can't, my people are gone.
Literally 1 week, we're in a massive church service. We're rocking out, having a blast, doing our thing. And then that week, we're shut down completely. We can't meet in this building.
I think we all kind of knew that wasn't our permanent home, right? We planned on having a building at some point. We just didn't know that March would happen and everything would shut down.
And at the beginning, it was I had a tiny little baby. I'm I don't have to try to get her out of the house. I can just stay home. But we all very quickly learned how important being in community with one another is.
We were closing school at that point. That was the last day. And I remember walking out of class and getting a text from Aaron that says, come to the church office, we've got work to do.
We had the podcast thing, but we didn't have anything else.
It was super tricky because, and for me too, really interesting because not only was it church couldn't meet, all of a sudden I can't work where I'm working. I went 7 days in a place to nothing in a place. And it just fell apart, which was, felt really nuts and a little scary in the beginning, right? We're going, what are we going to do now? And how do we meet?
So we have to figure out what to do.
We made it work. There was a team of people who were dedicated to figuring out the technology issues.
And it just got quiet. It was just a little bit of breeze. And it felt like the deep breath before this big plunge. And I remember just this feeling of one time was ending and another time was beginning. And it was sad but hopeful. It was sad in the fact that I was remembering all the past and how oh man, I'm gonna miss meeting with everyone. I'm gonna miss doing church that way. But it was hopeful because we were entering a new frontier. We were doing something that we had never done before. And it was okay. At that point, I was ready. And I was okay, God, what are you showing us through this time? And we got to the church office and Aaron shows up and we're all right, we got to figure out how to live stream this week. And I was just all right, let's get to it.
We had already been planning on live streaming. We'd already been kind of trying to figure out, okay, what does this look like? didn't really have any of the gear or anything at all.
You know, I know there was a lot of times that we talked about creating excellence in what we were doing and then looking at expanding into other places. And it's kind of like God was like, it's time for you to expand and, you know, trust me with some of the pieces in between.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Refuge. We're so glad you're joining us online today. Hey, this is our very first live stream event that we've ever done. We're super excited to do it. It's something we've been talking about doing for a long time. We had no idea we'd be doing it under these circumstances, but hey, we're glad you're joining with us today.
Luckily, we had that church office that we were able to, you know, get like 6 people in there and like kind of spread us out a little bit, but like cram all of our gear in, like have our giant soundboard in the corner and like 3 like instruments like in a row like this.
So challenging for online streaming.
The first time I remember we did it and so nervous, just totally shaking all the time. And as soon as we were done, as soon as we pressed, all right, stop stream, just everyone in the room just screamed. We were like, yeah!
Those were really cool experiences for the team of us that was coming together and challenging and tackling this new challenge of the online presence. Because from the beginning, we did a really good job. I mean, honestly, watching it and seeing the way that people were responding and the numbers was insane to see this like thing that had been pretty small, grassroots, sort of grown up, moved into the elementary school, and all of a sudden we're kicked out because you can't be in a school at all. And we're just gonna throw this thing online and see what happens. And it was like wildly successful.
It was such a victory. We overcame such an obstacle. And I remember just being like, all right, here's a new refuge. We've got our refuge that we've been building up from the Grange Elementary School. Now we've got an online kind of, you know, we can reach even more people, even people that aren't even in our state, and really blossoming the refuge.
We really had a heart of like just joy. Like we're not worried about this, you know. There was peace about it, and we were like had no idea where we're gonna go. We have a whole congregation that can't meet in a building, and you know we're just gonna live stream, you know, for a few weeks.
Just made lemonade with the lemons they were given, and I think that's true for every church in the nation. That there is just so much dedication to spreading God's word and showing up, even when literally you're not really supposed to.
You know, we've been pushed to think outside the box, and that's good for us because we've got some amazing thinkers and we have some really creative people, but sometimes you get stagnant in the everyday, okay, here we go, same thing, rinse and repeat. And I think that COVID has pushed us to think outside that box and be more creative so that we can reach those people that need to be reached.
And they did, and there were these people that made it work. And we did it to the best of our ability. And I am so proud of my family and my husband and the team of volunteers that gave their time, and not just their time, but their mental capacity. They gave up. They just gave up a lot to make online church what it was. And I'm really proud to be a part of a church that really strives for excellence in all things. And I think that the time we were doing church online was truly excellent.
All of a sudden, I found out, I got a call from Dad, and he said like, hey, like, don't tell anyone this because it's not official yet. And I got really excited when he said that. He's like, but we might have a church building.
I was getting to a point where continuing to do children's that way was really difficult, and I was doing it by myself because it's hard to coordinate volunteers in that realm. And your dad had actually called me at home and was like, hey, it was more of a prayer request. It wasn't like, it wasn't something that we were sharing at the time. It was kind of this is kind of something that's popped up on the radar. Not something that we know is going to go anywhere or not going to go anywhere, but just, something to be thinking about, be excited about, be praying about.
When the big move came, it was definitely not on our radar. It was one of those things where God just blessed us big time.
I was so glad when there were so many people that felt like, no, this is the step moving forward. And that was when I went fully crazy and dove in with more feet than I have and started completely revamping children's spaces, right? And creating that excellence that that we strive for all the time for our kids. And it was so fun to put decals on the wall, to get in and create a space that was our space that kids could come to and be excited to step into. Not that the other spaces weren't great, and we did a great job with those spaces, and they had such cool feels for our kids, but this is totally different. Children's is like a whole new thing now that is weekly exploding and becoming bigger and more exciting and more new because we can do different things. And so much of that is the way you lay something out. It's the way you lay out a space. It's the feel. It's the comfortability. You cannot underestimate how important that is. And I actually believe it's really important to God.
The Lord's been looking out for us, most definitely. That's the only way you can explain it. For this church this building to become available when it did, that's the Lord. That was the Lord working.
Right in the middle of COVID getting this place, that was definitely God sent. I was just like, when Jerry mentioned, I'm like, wow, awesome.
Just out of the blue for me, this building came available and was just such a surprise. I remember meeting with the people that had this building, and immediately in that meeting, we just sensed the Spirit of God moving. We sensed the Holy Spirit, all of us in that meeting. And we walked out of that meeting and got a phone call 10 minutes later, and they said, if you want to turn around and come back, we've got a key for you, and you can have this space to use.
And that is God. Like, what? It doesn't just happen. I've loved being a part of the Refuge from the very beginning. It's had its own ups and downs in with my personal life, but I'll say, ever since we were able to move into this building, it has become like immeasurably more fun to be together.
We have a lot more access to when we can use the rooms and stuff. I mean, it's our building now. I mean, it's our home for now.
My hope is that it hasn't changed too much. My hope is that it's still a refuge, that it's still a place where anybody can come in and immediately experience the love of God.
I don't think it has anything to do with the building. I think it has to do with our environment and our circumstances and what's holding us accountable to what and what's the highest act of love at any given time.
There's components that haven't changed at all. We're still an incredibly faithful group that there's weeks I can just feel the Spirit. And it didn't matter if we were on the lawn, the barn, the elementary school, the Grange, or here. You can just feel the Spirit.
I think we've done a very good job of externally growing, but internally we're still just the same, and that's the way it should be. Our heart's still the same, our core values are still the same, and we do things the way that we wanted to do them when we started this, but it looks a whole lot different than we expected, and I think that's the way it usually goes.
I haven't really noticed that much of a change.
For sure, nothing's changed as far as how much we rely on volunteer help to make the refuge work. But our efforts have changed. They go in a different direction. Like I just said about myself, instead of showing up at 8 to light a fire, I show up and I preach another message. Well, our volunteers now, instead of setting up chairs and taking down chairs, they're able to actually do more ministry to the community directly. Our children's department has grown just so much. And there's so many opportunities now for volunteers to help out with kids and to serve that way, or to serve on our media, sound and media and those kinds of ways. And there's just unlimited opportunities really for people to serve at the refuge, and we still rely 100% on those volunteers to make the refuge what it is.
I knew when we started this church that there was going to be sacrifices that were going to need to be made from all of us. It's part of being in the body of Christ, is laying down one's life for your friends. And truly, that's what we are at the refuge. We're friends.
I just remember walking in and not knowing many people very well, but feeling at home, just at peace, welcomed. That was huge.
Serving the church has been like a huge game changer. Coming to the refuge was a game changer. Just like, I think before, being a Christian was just, to me, like it was something that was always there. It was like, we went to church, I came back home, it was whatever. And then, going to the refuge, I found passion. Like, it was like, people there made me like, they were like role models. And like, for me, it was just like, I want to be a Christian. I want to work for God.
Each addition and every family and every person that's been brought to the refuge has been brought for a very specific reason. Like, we don't have any accidental people coming, like they just walk through the door and this looks good. I think the Lord is very purposeful with who he places in our congregation for a reason, and everybody serves such an amazing role here. And I think that's been the most impactful thing for me, is that like when we started, there was no inner circle to break into. It was just all family all the time. And I feel like that is still the case, even though we've grown and we are becoming different and bigger and we're delegating more things and we have a lot of teams and a lot of people heading different things. There's still that feeling when a new family walks in of being at home with the people in the refuge.
Getting to pour out something good into people, that always feels good. It fills you up. I don't know how to describe it, that pouring out can fill you up, but it does, because you're doing something that just feels good. You're doing something to help, and it is furthering God's kingdom, even if it's something little, like bleaching the kids' toys,
It's God. Anything's possible, and if we're going the way that He wants us to go, He'll bless us whichever way He deems, and that could mean, like your dad puts it, him doing a mega church here in the small town of Philomath, or it could be just like this. And either way, the refuge is just that. It's a refuge. So whatever it ends up looking like in 10 years is a place for people to come in and just be themselves. That's probably the biggest thing that took me away with the refuge is I don't really have to feel like I gotta fake it to belong,
It's the people. It's my brothers and sisters in Christ that have kept me not just accountable, but just walked with me and loved me and supported me in ways that I had never been supported in my life. Told me that I could do things that I never thought I could do.
think we'll be known as people that love.
So yeah, for sure I want to just say thank you to everybody who's served with us for the last 5 years. It's been a fantastic journey. It's been so much fun to do this with you, to serve along with you guys. I wouldn't want to do it alone, and so thank you guys for serving. Thank you for your faithfulness, and stay plugged in, stay connected, and let's see what the next 5 years is going to bring. It's going to be awesome.
I may not have the words to express my complete gratitude for all the volunteers and everyone who has either given or has come to church. That's a huge thing for me. Has stepped in and helped in whatever way they can. It has really, really made a difference in this community. It has made a difference in eternity. It has touched and blessed my life beyond what you can imagine. Whew. The fact that people have come and given of their own time, of their own resources, and have believed in this church and believed in this ministry has really, really touched my heart. And we couldn't have done it without you. Not a single thing. Thank you.
Over the last 5 years, so much has happened. We had no form. Now we have a family. We had no possessions. Now we have a building. Our friendships have strengthened. Our faith has grown. And our dream became our story.